What's up? Welcome to Bowhunting Pressure Whitetails. My name is Jake Cornish, and in this video slash podcast, however you're consuming this content, we're going to be talking about 2022 observations in the realm of in the field observations. I'm actually going to be splitting this up into two different episodes. One is going to be about gear, because there's a lot of things that I noticed I really sucked at this year and I could do better. And then the other one is about strategy. Actual stuff that happened this year for me when it comes to hunting and success that I had or didn't have. So just to preface beforehand, this is based off of my experiences here in Michigan. We actually hunted exclusively in our home state of Michigan this year, which is nuts. I haven't done that in a while. I've always gone out of state, especially when gun season hits. I'm just like, I don't want to be part of the Orange Army, just not my thing. I'd rather go pick up my bow and, run off to Ohio, go to Kansas, experience some, in my opinion, better quality hunting, just kind of prolong my season in that way. But this year we actually were in Michigan the entire time. We hunted the whole entirety of the rut. And you know what's crazy is it was our best year that we've ever had by a long shot. Like a long shot. We saw great deer movement. We had some unbelievable encounters. We've heard some unbelievable deer vocalizations, just stuff that has blown my mind. If you don't believe me, this was the buck that I got to take this year on public land in Michigan. Absolutely just blew me away. I'd never thought in a million years I would kill this guy. Got some pictures of him, but I did not think that he was going to be mine by any means. I have no idea what this deer scores. I haven't scored him yet, but he is massive, and I'm super, super happy, super blessed to even have an opportunity of this guy, to be honest. But if it wasn't for me killing this guy, we still would have had an amazing season, because my brother, John, he shot a really good buck on public in the same area. And my brother David shot a couple does. As of right now, I've shot 4 does. It's been pretty dang good. And all the scouting that's gone into trying to get on these new public areas and stuff has really paid off. But the other day, I literally was sitting down and I'm like, man, there is so much good information right now, just like kind of going around in my head. And I'm just thinking about these areas like, oh man, that spot was really hot during this time. Or man, we saw 2 or 3 different huge bucks running across the road when we were on our way to this other spot. Man, where were they coming from? Where were they going? So all this stuff is in my head about everything that has happened. And this is the perfect time to get out your computer or a notepad or however you want to do it and log stuff. Log everything, everything from the strategies that you had, the plans that you had in your head, if they worked or they didn't. What were your observations of stuff that you were seeing was really helping you or turning deer movement on versus stuff that wasn't. So I did exactly that, and I want to share with you guys some of my most important observations that I learned this past season that I'm for sure applying into my strategy going forward into the 2023 season. 2023, that's so weird to even say. Oh man, I'm getting old. I turned 30 this year, so there's that, So the first thing I want to talk about is weather conditions. So I feel like I've kind of had this one down. I don't feel like I've had anything to learn when it comes to weather conditions. I just pretty much I do what everybody else does. I've learned the same information everyone else has. But I want to talk about some stuff that maybe is just kind of flying over your head, just like it had been flying over mine. And these are things that I observed in the field that deer really responded to, even though I would say the vast majority of people would look at the weather conditions for that day and say, I'm not going to go out. So this is what we got. So on my phone, I have an entire page of hunting apps. All my trail cam apps, my podcast for all my hunting, Onyx, all that stuff. I have DeerCast. DeerCast, it's been an awesome app for me. I'm not affiliated or sponsored by them in any way, shape, or form. It's just an app that I have on my phone, and I've been using it. And I have noticed that a lot of the predictions that it has have been pretty dang accurate. When it has an algorithm and it combines all these weather conditions, and then it comes up with, it's like a wave chart, and it shows you what's the deer activity probably going to be like today based off of all these different conditions. And it's been really helpful for me, because not only does it give a prediction and then I can see what's going on in the field, but it has a chart, and it shows all the weather conditions in a very visually aesthetic way that really helps me. It shows the wind speeds, the wind directions, the temperature, barometric pressure, cloud cover, precipitation, everything that you would want to know as a deer hunter. It shows it, so that's been really good. I've enjoyed using it, but there has been some days where on the DeerCast, it was like, don't go out, horrible. Deer aren't going to move. They're going to be, sleeping. They're going to be laying down. They're not going to get up till after dark. And I literally observed the exact opposite thing. And it's not DeerCast's fault because this is an algorithm. It can't, perfectly predict everything. It just can't, it doesn't have the ability to be our minds and to take all of our locations. And, it's just an app. It's a very powerful app, but that is all it is. I've seen some stuff that I want to share with you that I thought was interesting. So some of the biggest weather changes I feel like that spark deer movement are, temperature changes, obviously, wind speed changes, obviously, cloud cover changes. That's been a big thing. I mean, pretty much every time that any one of those weather factors that has on that chart changes drastically, the deer move, they respond to it. But there's a couple things in particular I noticed that I never paid a whole lot of attention to, I feel like in the past, that deer actually move way more to than I realized. And the first one is wind direction. So I found this to be like an extreme deer movement trigger is when you have the wind's been blowing one way for a really long time, say southwest or something like that, and then all of a sudden it switches and is blowing north. It's like that first day that it switches and it's blowing north or east or whatever the situation is, like deer are moving. And I don't know exactly why. Like you can have everything else stay the exact same. Like temps can be the same, cloud cover the same, barometric pressure the same. Doesn't matter. Like the only thing that changes is that wind speed shift. Because a lot of times the wind direction shift. Because I feel like that a lot of times precedes some sort of weather front, and the deer know it. So I feel like that probably is some sort of a factor in getting them up and moving. The other thing I feel like is that the deer have been bedding a certain way, or they've been comfortable moving to and fro from their feed to their bed, in the last few days or whatever, with the wind direction that it has been. All of a sudden, it just switches, and it's totally different. Now the deer have to adjust, and naturally it's going to make them travel in areas they haven't been. They might be bedding in spots that they maybe haven't been before. And so just because of that, you're going to see a lot more deer movement in general. The other thing was cloud cover change. I don't think people put enough emphasis on the syllable when it comes to cloud cover change, because I had a day where it was I think it had been a super good, traditional deer movement days, cold, pretty good moderate wind speeds. But the thing that had stayed relatively the same was that freaking lake effect weather, like the cloud cover. It was 90% for days and days and days. And then what happened was we had a warm front move in. So that whole time that we had this really cold weather, DeerCast was man, this is the best. The deer activity should be through the roof. And it was pretty good. I'm not going to lie. It wasn't bad. But when that warm front came through, everything changed in a way that you would look at it and you would say, this is worse. It's a lot worse. Except there's this one thing that changed, and that was the cloud cover. The cloud cover had been solid 90%, and that first day with the warm front, it dropped off to 0, and we had clear skies. And you know what? The temps might have been higher, but the deer were out like rabbits everywhere. The fields were just filled with them. When you have those cloud cover changes, I'm not kidding you, they can really, really spark some serious feeding activity. Next thing I wanted to talk about is just how you access your spots, your stands with the weather conditions that you have. And I'm not talking about the wind direction. Everybody knows the stereotypical, you got to make sure the wind's good for your spot. If we can just forget everything that we've ever been taught about the weather conditions and how it affects how you hunt different areas or how you access spots. I'm just going off of what happened to me this fall. So I had probably 2 or 3 different very similar weather conditions. We'll just talk about them. A lot of it doesn't matter, but what I want to talk about mostly is ground conditions and how they affected my access and my setups and me seeing deer versus not. The first thing would be those dry, warm days. We had some dry, warm days this past year. We had them in October. We had quite a few of them in November, and it really stifled deer movement. What's your plan with those dry, warm days? Because I'm just here to tell you, I sat some sits. I done sat some sits that were pretty crappy. So in the evenings, this is pretty much how it would play out, is that If you have high winds, if you have, you can couple that with all the bird noises and everything, you can sneak into spots. So that was good. Then you sit there all evening. Then the wind speeds would die down. And then you're left with this forest floor of super dry, crunchy leaves. And I mean, it's like you're walking on glass trying to get out of there. So you come into a spot that's probably fresh and you leave the spot. I mean, everything knows that you were there. So that's usually what would happen in the evening. Basically, what was happening was it would take a lot longer for the temps to drop in the evening. Everything's warm. The ground's warm. The trees are warm. The air is warm. So when that sun drops down below the horizon, you may be out of hunting time like that. Like your daylight might be gone. But those temps are the same. Like they have not had the time to drop down and dip down. Because when they do that, a lot of times, 9 times out of 10, it was creating some sort of dew or moisture in the air. Because you've had all that warm air. Now you have, everything's cooling down. And the air is cooling down faster than the ground's cooling down. At least I think that's how it works. And it creates moisture that falls on the leaves. So then you have a soft forest floor. This made for some incredible morning sits. Number one, it just made access in the mornings way better than your access in the evenings, because you could get in with a damp forest floor. So you have a better option for access in the mornings. If you sit long enough into that like late morning time frame when the wind speeds pick up, you can still get out without busting everything. It works in the deer's favor a lot too, because the deer prefer to move when they're not like sounding like a herd of elephants particularly, and they like to move once that dew settles. They can move around more quiet. Like they're just going to do that. Like they're going to move the most when the ground's soft. And so because of the fact that once the sun came up in the morning, it would take longer for everything to warm up in the morning, you would have prolonged activity hours in the morning. So a lot of times I was seeing really good movement in the first light all the way up until 10, 11 o'clock by the time the leaves were getting really dry and the deer were bedding down and all that stuff. So this made for some really, really good morning sits for me. Both the bucks that me and my brother killed were on morning hunts. They just seemed like they were producing way better for us when we had those dry conditions. Now, when you have the wet conditions, the playbook is open. Like you can go and hunt those evening sits. You can get out of them clean. Your options are way better. A lot of times you'll see more activity in the afternoon because the deer can still move around. The wind speeds up a little bit, like they're not making a lot of noise. When the ground's a little bit moist, the evenings seem to be much better. The other thing I noticed is that the deer will just prefer to move in areas where they're not making as much noise when the ground is dry. And a lot of times that was field edges, that was places that just didn't have as much debris on the ground. All right, off of the weather, because I can only talk about weather so long without getting bored out of my mind. Let's see. Let's talk about cell cameras. My opinion and how I've used cell cameras has changed, like almost done like a 180 from where I was probably before this season to what I think about them now and how I want to use them now. I'll just start by giving you my view on cell cameras and how I felt like I should use them before this season first, and then I'll talk about how I feel like I want to use them now. Before the hunting season opened up, the way I was using cell cameras was as a high efficiency, quick scouting tool. So what I would do is I would go put a cell cameras out in spots, and I felt like because of the fact that I was seeing the pictures immediately when they came in, I could quickly get a read on that area, figure out like, is this, the deer using it the way I think they are or not? If they're not, I can just jump back in real fast, move it, reposition the camera, and just be able to cover spots and bedding areas and pinch points quicker to find out what areas are better and what aren't. And for the most part, that strategy worked fairly well for me. Like I wasn't letting the camera sit out in a spot that was just dead, and I was able to go and reposition that quickly, and it worked out pretty good. But this year's results has greatly changed how I feel about cell cameras. So both my buck, and I wish I had my brother's buck too. I'd hold that one right beside this one. But both of our bucks that we shot this year, both of these bucks were shot based off of cell camera data. What ended up happening was I found some really good bedding areas. And I put a couple of these cell cameras on the fringes of these bedding areas. And what I found was before, I would get a picture of a buck, and I would be like, oh man, that's awesome. This buck is huge. The problem would be that the buck is no longer there. You got a picture of him, which means that is a thing that happened in the past. It's not present information. Like, yeah, you can go hunt it, but there's a high chance that he's not anywhere in that area anymore. And that would be the situation for me 9 times out of 10 when I would put my camera on some sort of a travel route. I would put it on the edge of a field. I'd put it literally anywhere except for the fringe outer rim of a bedding area or inside of a bedding area. When I did that, I was getting pictures of deer all times of the day. But I was getting pictures of a lot of deer, and when I get a picture of a deer, the likelihood that that deer is very close to my camera is very high. There's a very high likelihood that they bedded down, in that bedding area, or like even when I get a picture of a deer at, let's say, like 1 a.m., even though I got a picture of that deer in the middle of the night, it very well may be in that area come daybreak. I mean, it could have been traveling through, but if it was to hold in any spot that I wanted to hunt, I was in the best spot. Like, that camera was in the bedding area. So these bedding areas were like, they're general deer bedding areas. They're not buck-specific beds. I was targeting very well-used deer bedding areas, spots where, multiple deer. If you walk up there and you jump 5-6 deer, it's those kind of bedding areas I'm talking about. I guess you can call them doe bedding areas. You can call them whatever you want. They're deer bedding areas. That's what I was focusing on. There was times when, the bucks were in there a lot. There was times when they weren't. But the great part about hunting those kind of bedding areas is that deer will pass through. You know that those big bucks, if they're not there right now and it's, October, they probably will be once the rut hits, because they're going to start following the does in. And it's just such a good spot, I feel like, to be putting cell cameras, and it worked great for us this year. Because in the end, I feel like MRI is king. So MRI, we're talking about most recent information. And I feel like killing a big buck, especially in Michigan, we're just going to be honest, there's not a lot of really big mature bucks roaming the woods. It's not like other states. Being in the right place at the right time it's so crucial. And you want to narrow down, take the broad swath of days that you could hunt. You want to narrow it down as much as possible to where you feel like you're going in on days that are very likely that big buck is in there. And what better way to do that than monitoring an area with cell cameras? And I'm not talking about I won't go in and hunt it unless I get a picture of that big buck. So when we shot John's buck, there was a different big buck that was in that area that night. And we had just had tons of deer on cell cameras. And so I just knew that area was hot, because you don't have to get that buck on the cell camera. But if you're getting, a bunch of little bucks, other bucks you've never seen before, does, tons of does hitting the areas, it doesn't matter. If your camera's on a scrape, if it's on trail, when the activity picks up, the area's hot, you should be in there and you should probably hunt it. So going forward, my strategy with cell cameras, I'd probably still use them for scouting a little bit. I'm probably going to buy some really cheap non-cellular cameras, just regular old Walmart cameras, and I'll use those for scouting. I might leave them up, a whole year or something, and then go pull them. And so those will be more of a passive scouting, part of a passive scouting strategy to kind of figure out new areas. But I definitely am going to keep using cell cameras to monitor bedding areas. I'll probably put 2 cell cameras per bedding area on the hottest trails that I've been able to find, or 1 on a scrape, 1 on a trail, just because I feel like based off of the winds, you never know. They could skirt your camera, but I feel like having 2 in there would be much better than just having 1, which is what I had this past year. So that's what our cell camera strategy was. That's what it is now. Now I want to talk about just the terrain of what you're, hunt. Basically, in my opinion, I feel like you should be hunting the stuff that you enjoy hunting the most, because you're going to put in the most time, you're going to put in the most effort into hunting that stuff. Personally, I'll just tell you from, there's been some spots I've gone to and I've scouted, and I've heard other people talking about them, and I'm like, you know what? There's some big deer that get taken out of there, some big deer. But personally, I don't get much joy about hunting them. They're super monotonous, or there's just not much, there's not much terrain. It's very flat or whatever. It looks different for everybody. Some people don't have much of a choice on the kind of terrain that they hunt. But I will say, I feel like I have to focus down on the stuff that I enjoy hunting the most. For me, that ends up being public, that is in and around a lot of agricultural areas, private land that has ag on it, even if the public doesn't have any ag on it, just because I feel like I have a better quality deer to hunt. A lot of times the genetics are better, the antlers are bigger, plus the deer numbers are higher. So I just feel like even when the properties, the public pieces are small, sometimes they don't look like much. I've hunted them and I've found like sometimes the activity level can be like way better on these little bitty parcels that don't look like much because the deer numbers and the quality is better surrounding them. We found areas that were like big, giant, open, thick fields / cornfields / clear cuts, whatever it was, spots where deer could get to that people weren't really hunting because there wasn't any suitable tree stand trees. Those kind of spots were money. So like it could be swamps, it could be CRP type grassy stuff, thick stuff, clear cuts, cornfields even. There were some cornfields that we hunted this year that just, I mean, the deer were bedding everywhere in them. So when you find a spot like that, you could be like a dynamite bedding area because a lot of times there's not a lot of human scent that goes through there, and so it can be good for a long time before it starts to get busted up. Lastly, I just want to encourage you, like, log your data. Obviously, this whole video is based around the data that I've logged from this past fall. But if you don't film, because I film, so like there's a lot of stuff that I can go back and I can watch it and I can be like, wow, you know, I never really realized this, or wow, there was deer moving in this spot and I didn't really catch that, but now I can look back and watch the footage. So I have that privilege, but I know a lot of you guys don't film your hunts, and that's not bad. Just, I would say log your hunts and your experiences even sooner, because like the fresher that your mind is, where you can log everything, it's really going to help you out. Like log where you're seeing deer cross the road. Like there's times where we've been on our way to our spot we're going to hunt and we're like, wow, big buck just crossed the road. And then like maybe a week later, you're in the same area and another big buck crosses the road, like a mile away, but in the same general area. And you're like, man, wonder why that is. You may not figure it out. These big bucks could be living and their core area could be this random piece of private land, and you have absolutely no idea where the piece of private land is or where they're traveling from or what their travel loop looks like. All you got to know is exactly what you just saw, and then log that. You know, if you can log the wind direction, that's also a very good thing to keep track of, because big bucks will move with the wind like so much. If you're hunting bedding areas, log when you get a big buck that goes through a bedding area, log that wind. Like that can really help you figure out, like, some bedding areas, especially the one that I killed my big buck on, they're only good during a north or an east wind, or some variation of that. So I can almost rule out all south wind days and be like, you know what, big buck's probably not going to feel comfortable going in there on a south wind. So that can really help you out a lot. If you're really struggling to find like a good area, I would encourage you to, like, I do this a lot on out-of-state hunts where I just go and I drive roads, like prime time, early morning, first light, go out and drive roads around the perimeters of public areas. And you might feel like you're wasting your time, but like if you start seeing like a lot of deer in a general area, you can get onto something way faster. Like you can get intel so much quicker driving roads with a pair of binoculars than you can have going and sitting random areas that you can't see anything and doing it over and over in different spots. Like that's a very, very long time-staking way to try to figure out where the best area is to hunt. Even trail cameras are not as fast intel gatherers as your two eyeballs. You know, if you can drive roads and you'll be able to see, you know, sometimes like 15, 20 different deer crossing the roads, coming out in different areas. Like log all that stuff, and then if you do that a couple times, I guarantee you're probably gonna have an idea of like, you know, there's this little piece of public in here. I didn't really think about this spot before, but there's a lot of deer that move around in this general area. I've seen 2 different bucks, you know, a half mile from that piece. So maybe I should go check it out. And that's the kind of stuff that you're looking for when you're logging information. And then lastly, there are some things that I will not share because they pertain to very specific pieces of public land, very specific bedding areas that I have been hunting, and I definitely won't be sharing that information. But it's that kind of stuff that you got to log. That'll help you get back in there and hunt that spot better the next year. So thank you guys so much for watching / listening, however you're consuming this content. I really appreciate it. The YouTube algorithms are not always very easy to understand, or kind. Sometimes you got videos that do awesome. Other times you get videos that are complete duds. So I really appreciate all you guys that come in, check in, and watch content that I've been putting out. It really encourages me to keep making more, honestly. I love doing this just because this is my number one hobby. So I'll do it probably regardless if I make any money at all doing it or if I get any kind of a following. I'm probably still going to keep doing this for a while. But whenever I do get that positive encouragement from you guys, whether in the comment section or just watching my subscriber count go up slowly, it's very encouraging for me, so I really appreciate it. I hope you guys have had a great season. I'll have a lot more videos coming your way, all sorts of stuff, probably some scouting stuff, ice fishing. I can't wait to go shed hunting, honestly, if you can tell behind me. Can't wait to get some more bone. And I got to get my brother on because this is my buck, but his buck is a freaking dandy. And maybe I'll bring this one and get both of our bucks because they happened probably within, I think, a couple weeks of each other in the same general area. And so it's just so cool to be able to just see, like, wow, about broke my light bulb. See the success that we've been able to have by intensely scouting and hunting certain general areas. So thanks, guys. We'll catch you in the next one.